Good, you? Welcome back to the New Hampshire Vintage Channel. My name is Wyatt.
I'm Eric.
And today we're going to see if this 1995 Formula S 380 fan cooled, I believe, can get running and riding. Hasn't ran in a year or so, so we're going to dig into it and see if we can get it running and maybe ride around the house tonight.
This is Zoe.
And that's Zoe, the new camera star.
So this is a 380 Formula, like we said. It's a fan-cooled sled. There is not much going on under these things. It is a very simple, very simplistic sled to work on. This particular model has no reverse, no electric start, so really doesn't get much easier than this thing. This sled has about 3,300 miles on it or so. Like I said, I bought it off my girlfriend's father, and he used it as kind of a beater sled, and it's about what I plan to do with it. Hasn't run in probably a year or so, maybe a little longer. But I have pretty high hopes that it should fire it up with a little bit of tinkering. Not quite as vintage as the stuff we normally work on, but that's okay, and we're gonna have fun with it either way. So first things, before we dig too far into it, I kind of like to get an overall view of everything and see what we're dealing with. Right off the bat, I can tell that fuel lines seem to be still pretty pliable, so that's good. Not all dry rotted and cracked. The oil injection lines, same thing. They're all pretty pliable still. I don't see any big puddles of oil in here, so that's good. Chain case oil is not terrible, honestly. There's a little bit of grit down there in the bottom on the magnet, but we'll go ahead and probably change that towards the end there. But overall, it looks to be viable for sure. Nothing crazy going on in there. We're missing an exhaust spring over here, but that's not a huge deal. No real broken or bent linkages. A-arms look pretty good. The A-arms on these sleds were pretty notorious for snapping and bending from people driving over big bumps and stuff, but doesn't look like either of them have been welded, or trailing arms, I'm sorry. Looks like we are missing the clutch covers, but again, not a huge deal. This sled's not going to see a ton of miles, and not really the end of the world. Let's dive into it. Let's pull the plugs out and do ourselves a quick compression test. I have pretty comfortable that it will have compression, and we'll go from there. We're going to go ahead and pop the plugs out of this high performance machine. We'll have a quick gander here. Nothing too alarming. No metal chunks and no water, so that's good. Actually, doesn't look like they've probably been in here all that long. Same thing there, looking pretty good on that one. So again, pretty high hopes that we should be in good shape here. I have it on good information that this sled ran perfectly before I purchased it, and like I said, just been sitting for a little while now, so with any luck, a little bit of carburetor work and should be riding. Go ahead and get this threaded in. So compression tests, always want to kill sparks, so we're going to close the kill switch there. Ideally you want to do it at wide open throttle. Not a huge deal if you don't. You're more so looking for even numbers here, not, we're not shooting for the moon. It's a pretty small engine, but let's see what we got. What are we showing?
145.
145. That's great. I'll take that all day.
140, 145.
That's a ton for a cold motor that hasn't run in a year. And we'll go ahead and on number 2 here and see what we got. How are we looking?
140-ish.
Yep.
Maybe 138.
I'll take that with it within 5 or 10 psi. That's not terrible. All right, so that should fire up no problem. All right, so that felt really good. It pulled over really nicely. Didn't feel any kind of binding or anything like that. I even saw the headlight kicking on there for a second, so that's good news as well. So now I think we're going to just kind of dive into the fuel system, which is going to be carburetors on this thing. The 4 things you need to make a motor run is air, fuel, spark, and compression. So we are going to assume we're getting air. We'll check that in a few when we get into the air box. We checked spark earlier, so we know we have spark, we have compression. So all that's left is fuel. So we're going to tear the carburetors off this thing and see what they look like. All right, so we are going to undo a couple hose clamps here. This air box should be super easy to get off. Like I said before, really not a whole lot going on in these things, so everything crazy easy to work on these metal areas. There we go, just like that. So it looks like we do have the coil pack attached to the bottom of it here. So what I'm going to do to make things easier is just take both of the plug wires right with the whole airbox assembly. Get that right out of the way. I'm going to go ahead and wind the throttle valves out the top here. Get these out of the way. There's one. There's two. So we got a couple fuel lines here. Those are on there pretty good. So I'm going to see if I can. I'm going to take the carburetor off of the intake boot first. And I'll show you guys a little trick I have for getting stuck fuel lines off of carbs like this without destroying them. So I like to kind of grab the fuel line with a pair of pliers. Just give it a little twist until it kind of breaks free from its seal there. And if we're lucky, not always, but sometimes, yeah, it's starting to come. There is one. I'm going to do the same for this guy here. This one might be a little harder because it's such a tiny fitting. There's two. We got one free. We'll put this on the bench. And we'll just go ahead and do the same thing on the other side here. Sometimes this trick doesn't always work. If it doesn't, and you're a little, I want to say confident in your abilities, but you can take a little a crack torch of some kind and put a little heat to the line too, and that will help tremendously. But obviously you got to be really careful because you're dealing with fuel lines. Heat gun works too. There's two. So once I have the carbs off, I like to take a peek down the throat here. Have a look into the intake bore here. So looking down here, I can actually see the sides of the pistons. So you'd be able to see if there was any like real heavy scoring or anything like that. I don't know if you guys can see that. There you go, right there. That is piston skirt right there. So if I don't know if I can roll the motor over. You can kind of see there goes the piston. There's your connecting rod. And it's gonna come back down. If we can get the camera focus here. There we go. So overall, pretty good. Not terrible. Looks like there's a little bit of scuffing there on the very left-hand side of that piston, but we had good compression, so we're really not going to lose any sleep over that. We'll go ahead and do the same thing on the other cylinder here. Same idea. Nothing crazy going on in there. No big gouges or anything like that, so I'm pretty happy with that for a 20-something-year-old sled. So
I was gonna say, not too bad for an old sled.
We should be in pretty good shape here, I think.
I've ridden a lot worse.
Yeah. So let's go ahead and get those carbs peeled apart, and we'll go from there. So I almost forgot real quick before we peel those carbs apart. I'm going to take these fuel lines, put it into a little bucket here. Typically, I like to use like a glass mason jar or something so I can look down the side of it, but we don't have one here in the shop today, so this should work just fine for what we're doing. I'm going to hold these lines into a bucket. I'm going to have Wyatt here just pull the motor over a couple times. We're going to kill the spark again, and we're just going to see if we can get a fuel sample to see what the gas in this thing is looking like. Go ahead, Wyatt. So we're obviously not getting any fuel out of it, which is not thoroughly surprising. Oh, we got a little drop there towards the end. We should start by seeing if it actually has fuel in it. And there is some in the tank. That's good. Like I said, this sled's been sitting for about a year or so, so it's to be assumed that the lines are probably going to be pretty dry here. So I'm actually going to give the primer a couple pumps here and see if we can't get anything to maybe come out of the primer lines. Make our lives a little bit easier. There we go. I'll get my fat head out of the way and see we got a little bit of fuel coming out of those primer tubes, which is good. Also telling us we got a functioning primer, which is awesome. So it's a little yellow, but overall really not too bad. This sled will probably burn that, no problem. We'll top it off with some fresh fuel and we should be off to the races. Looks like maybe we got a tiny bit of water separation going on at the bottom, but again, really nothing I'm going to lose sleep over with this machine. So I think we should be good. Let's go ahead and get into those carbs. All right, so we're over here on the bench. Get the carb all apart. I like to put gloves on for this part. It's a little late in the game to be putting gloves on, I guess, after all we've done so far, but I find working on these carbs with bare hands, your hands tend to smell like raw fuel for like a week afterwards. So, and plus it doesn't hurt, so that stuff doesn't soak into your skin. So this is a pretty run-of-the-mill Mikuni carb. You got your top hat slide there. Pretty generic carburetor. They put these in millions of different machines, snowmobiles, four-wheelers. Very popular carb, super easy to work on. Parts are always readily available for these things, so go ahead and get this peeled apart. Really don't need many tools for this. Basic Phillips head screwdriver, flathead screwdriver. I like to use a little eyeglasses screwdriver here. That helps with getting the jets out sometimes. Or I know we have a couple screwdrivers here that are filed down as well if they're stubborn. So let's go ahead and get the bowl peeled off of this thing. Of course, the screws are going to fight me.
There's that sound I like.
You and me both. That sound means I'm not drilling out a screw, which is always a good thing. Yeah, let's see if we can get this one to break free for us. I'm gonna really put some weight into it here. There it goes. Perfect. Now I didn't drain this carburetor out, so it might make kind of a mess here in a second. So actually, I'm just gonna run over to the bin real quick and dump this out so it doesn't make a giant mess. All right, so all things considered, really not too bad. A little bit of yellowing going on in there, but not seeing any real big buildups of gunk or anything like that. No big deposits of sand or dirt. So altogether, I'm pretty happy with that. The gaskets, it's not in the greatest shape. It could definitely use a carb kit, but we don't have one here with us today, so we're going to see what we can make do with what we got. So we'll go ahead and get the main jet pulled out of here. I'm actually going to go grab a socket. And looks like the other jet will be a screwdriver. So we'll go from there. That's probably going to be an 8mm. All right, so we're going to go ahead and, oh, I misspoke. That's not an 8mm. It's actually quite a bit smaller. There we go. All right, so that ended up being a 6mm. So we're going to go ahead and get the, that's going to be our idle speed jet. low speed jet, depending on who you ask. Pulled out of there. We'll set that off to the side. I like to go ahead and give that a little blow, and looking pretty good, nice and clear. So all around, this thing is actually in really good shape. I would say that this thing probably would have fired up with a little bit of pulling and a little bit of work, but it probably would have touched off eventually. But given that it's a rope start and I already have crappy shoulders, I didn't really feel like spending all night pulling that thing over. So we're going to go ahead and give this a tap. That's not going to work. We're going to get a punch for that. All right, so we're over here on the vise. I like to use the vise to get the float pin out very lightly in the vise, because these are aluminum, these are steel jaws. If you go too hard, you will mar up the aluminum pretty badly. So just tight enough to hold the thing in there so it doesn't move around, but by all means do not reef on it, because you will cause damage to the carburetor. So we'll go ahead and give this a couple light taps here, and that's going to come right out, which is awesome. All right, so we got that float out of the way, and see there, the needle does move, so that's good. The needle's not frozen. Go ahead and get the little keeper pin pushed out of the way here. Nice. Pull the needle out. That's a steel tip needle, so that's good. Everything's looking really good. I'm actually not even going to bother taking the seat out of this thing, because then you run the chance of ruining that gasket there under the seat. And the seat looks really good inside there. The needle looks good, so I think that's probably where we're going to stop with that. We'll go ahead and get this high-speed jet out, hopefully. Same there, looks good, nice and clear. So we're looking pretty good here all around. I think we're just about ready to hit the ultrasonic. I did misspeak earlier. I always get confused when these things are upside down in my hand. The high-speed jet was the one that I pulled out first in the center here, and the idle speed jet was the second one I just pulled out of the longer tube there. So we'll get the idle speed screw pulled out here. I like to wind these in and count how many turns they are, and then we'll get the fuel mixture screw pulled out as well. 1/2, 1, 1.5, 2, 2.5. It's probably 2 3/4, we'll call it. Those ones aren't as important because you can adjust those on the fly pretty easily. I just like to jot that down somewhere. Helps me remember. And then we'll do the mixture screw. Same thing, we're going to count into a light seat and then back it out. So 1/2, 1. It was only about 1 turn, so usually these run about 1.5, but that's probably where I'll start it at when we put it back together, and then it can be adjusted from there. You always want to make sure there's usually a spring that goes with that as well. So you want to make sure that spring comes out now and not when you're blowing the carburetor out and it goes flying across the shop later. Some of these will have, not necessarily this carb in general, but carburetors sometimes will have, in addition to the spring, we'll have a flat washer and a rubber O-ring in there as well. So you want to make sure you check for that again before you go to blow it out and that tiny little part goes flying across the shop and you lose it forever. So this one, I believe, does not have any of that in there, so we should be good. And the last thing before we dunk this in the bath is we're just go ahead and take these vent lines off. It's not like crazy important, but it frees up a little bit of space in the ultrasonic cleaner, at least until we can get a bigger ultrasonic. So this one I actually am going to go ahead and heat up a little bit, hopefully not catch the shop on fire in the process. See if that loosens that up at all. Bingo. Same thing over here. Just want to be really careful with the torch, obvious reasons. And same thing. Sweet, we're ready to go. So we're gonna go ahead and get this in its bath. And some people, you can take the floats out of the bowl. You can take these little plastic caps off of these rods, and then the floats will slide off the rods. Kind of personal preference. These things like to blow apart sometimes when you take them off. So I'm probably just going to put this whole thing right in the ultrasonic, and we should be good to go. If this thing was like really disgusting and needed a really deep cleaning, then I'd be more apt to do that, but I think we're going to be just fine. We'll go ahead and throw all of our tiny parts in our little tea basket here. Get the jet in there. This stuff I don't really worry too much about cleaning. There's no, I'll put that in there, but the rest of that stuff isn't really super important. Either is that. We'll put the idle speed screw in there as well. Oh. Yeah, Wyatt, I think we definitely got to get a bigger ultrasonic here.
Yeah, it's time.
Maybe once we hit monetization. So subscribe so we can buy a bigger ultrasonic and make better videos. All right, so we get these back out of the ultrasonic after a couple minutes there. Looking pretty good, nice and clean. I like to just run these under some water in the sink just to rinse all the simple green out of them. We run simple green in the ultrasonic. Some people like to use parts cleaner. There's 100 different things you can put in it, but I've had pretty good luck with simple green, so that's what I run with. But you definitely want to rinse the simple green out of everything before you go ahead and start blowing it out. So we're just going to take the main body here and go ahead and blow it out. All right, so we got everything kind of dried out here. Pretty good. We'll just go ahead and put all those jets back in and kind of put it back together. I just like to sight down these before they go back in. Still looking nice and clean and clear. It's kind of tough to do with the camera, but I like to hold them up to a light or the sun if you can. Well, maybe not the sun, you don't want to look right at that, but you know what I mean. Make sure it looks nice and smooth. If you have a jet that's plugged, you can usually unclog it with some good compressed air. Just want to make sure you're holding on to this real tight so it doesn't go flying across the shop, because you'll definitely never find that again. Or they do make carburetor drill bit kits. They're really tiny incremented drill bit set that you can match up to whatever size jet you have and wind out the hole and clean it out if it was really, really plugged up. But I've yet to encounter, I do have that set, but I've yet to encounter an instance where I genuinely needed it. So anyways, we'll go ahead and put these back in. Put that guy down in there. And just nice and snug with that. Don't have to go crazy tight on it. Again, it is aluminum, so you can rip the threads out of this stuff pretty easily or damage it. And I just forgot, I did not look down this one, so I'm going to pull that back out real quick. There you go, nice and clean. So like I said earlier, I misspoke originally. This is your main jet or your high-speed jet. As you can see, you get a pretty good-sized orifice in that, whereas the smaller one that I put back into this hole over here is, a significantly smaller orifice. But so when this is in there like that, and the carburetor is oriented like this in the machine, so that jet, your high-speed jet, is lower in the carburetor. So as the carburetor requests more fuel because you're inducing more air into the engine, the fuel level will increasingly grow a little bit lower in the bowl. So that's why your high-speed jet is lower in the bowl than your idle speed jet or your low speed jet, which is tucked up in here basically. So that is always immersed in enough fuel to keep the machine supplied with the correct amount of gas. So go ahead and put our float back in. I'm sorry, our needle. So the needle goes in like so. And then we'll go ahead and get this clip back on here if I can, which apparently I can't. Sorry, my neighbor just texted me and asked me if I wanted tacos. A little distracted there. There we go. Okay, that's good. Nice and clipped in, just like that. Good. And we'll go ahead and put our, I can't remember what the proper term for this thing would be, but this is basically what the, so when the bowl goes on and the floats are going to ride against, see that little shiny spot there, and there is where your floats are going to contact this guy and allow it to travel up and down, which will in return allow that needle to travel in and out of that seat and allow fuel to flow through the carburetor or stop. So we're going to go ahead and throw that there. And then we're going to go ahead and try and push this thing back in. Sometimes you'll get a carburetor that the your hinge pin there fits better one way than the other. This one's got a flat spot on one side, so it can't go all the way through. Some of them you'll find have like knurling on one end, so you want to make sure that basically the knurling goes back in the same side it came out of, because it'll just go together a lot easier in that way. So yeah, we'll go ahead and I'm just gonna put this back in the vise real quick, give that a soft little tap to send that all the way home. All right, so we give that a little tap. We're good and through there. Oops, sorry. Our float valve there is operating as it should. So one thing I like to do before I put these, before I put these all the way back together, is just verify that that needle does in fact move freely in and out of that seat. So if I hold it vertically, perfectly vertically, like it is oriented, well, you can kind of see the needle there. I'm going to move that up to, replicate the floats moving up. So it travels up, comes back down, up, back down. So you can see that needle is moving nicely in and out of that seat. It's not binding, it's not grabbing. It's just what you want to see. You want that to move perfectly in and out without a problem. The other thing I like to do too, I probably won't do it on this thing because it's a little tricky to get to, but some of them have the inlets off to the side. I like to actually just blow into this with my mouth and use my thumb to hold that needle closed and just make sure that that seat is really mating nicely to that needle and you don't have anything leaking by, because it really sucks to put these all back together, put it back in the machine, hook up the fuel to it, and then realize that you either have a bad needle or a bad seat, and then it just leaks fuel all over the ground, and it's not a good time all around. So they do make a tool, a pressure test tool, where you can hook it up to your fuel inlet, close your needle, and put some pressure to it. I tend to just pull my mouth on that and put a little pressure to it with my mouth, and like I said, just hold that needle shut and make sure it doesn't leak any air by, and that usually tends to work for me. So from there, basically just going to do everything in reverse. I'm going to put the bowl back on. I'm going to put these two screws, your idle speed screw and your mixture screw with the spring, of course. I'm going to put all these back in to their respective turns out that we took them out at. So just obviously, like I said, everything in reverse, and we'll put it back together. All right, so we're all back together here. We got our vent lines back on, the bowls back on, idle screws back in, idle speed screws back in. I set this to a turn and a half out, which is usually a good starting point. And then I set the idle speed screw to where it was, which was our 2 3/4 that I've written down there. So this is pretty much good to go back in the machine. The vent lines here are pretty hard and stiff. Like you saw, I had to heat up the ends of them to slip them off. But I'm really not too concerned with that. They're not cracked. They're not broken anywhere. And at the end of the day, they really are just vent lines. So it's not going to impede the operation of the snowmobile. That these are not, nice and pliable new fuel lines. So I'm just going to leave these for now, and we'll go ahead and get the other one peeled apart.
Hey guys, so it's me again. As you can probably tell by the bare hands and the different sleeves. I'm not going to go as in depth as Eric did. I think he did an awesome job showing all the components on these carbs and how to actually rebuild these things in the right way and all that stuff. I'm just going to take this one apart real fast, just show you guys what's in this one, make sure, see if it's dirty, if it's as clean as the other one was or whatnot. So we'll get going on this one. We're going to do the same thing here. There it is. Oh, that one's actually loose. Wow. I always want to struggle taking these out. Come on. There you go. There we go. My guess is this is going to be probably the same as the other one. I don't really see why this one would be as be dirtier. Whatnot. Oh yeah, pretty much the same as the other one. Just a little bit of gunk way at the bottom, but nothing that bad at all. Like Eric said, I think a little bit of ether in there, and the sled would have barked off. But it's all right. It's good to go through these anyways to make sure. I'm not going to go through taking all this apart. You just saw that. So we'll get this all cleaned up like the other one is, and we'll get back to the sled and get these all back together and go from there. So I wanted to just show a quick thing here. Taking this apart, whoever took this apart last, a lot of you carb guys will automatically see, but that little guy, this gasket's supposed to be flipped, and this little guy here is supposed to be around here. And that could always cause an issue with this carb as well. Just a little tiny thing like that can make this whole thing act up. And you'll figure out, be like, oh, maybe the air screw's still off, or maybe something's going on, but that could be definitely a big problem. So that's why, even if one looks clean, always take the other one apart, because little things like this that you find can be a big problem. So now we got to try to find a razor blade or something to try to get this gasket off and see if we can flip it to get that on. So I just want to show you guys that real fast. I'll see you once this is off and back together.
All right, so while we are waiting for those carbs to finish cleaning, we're gonna do a quick, we're gonna do a belt inspection, and then we're gonna go through the skid here in a second. So looking at the belt, I can tell right off the bat it definitely needs a new belt. Kind of tricky to see, but I don't know if you can see. Just a lot of dry cracking between the ribs of the belt. So we'll probably go ahead and replace that after we get it running. The clutches definitely could use a little bit of a surface cleaning. Probably hit that with a Scotch-Brite, get it a little shined up in there, and get the rough edges off. Looking over here at the skid, got the sled jacked up in the air here. Just kind of want to jump in here and check the track tightness. That's not terrible. It definitely looks like it needs a set of high facts. Those are just about worn through to the rails, which is not thoroughly surprising. Again, something we'll probably address after we get it running. We'll go ahead and kind of spin the bogey wheels here. Make sure nothing's falling off. These actually feel pretty good, surprisingly. That one, I'll push the track down in a second and spin it. But you just kind of want to jump in here and give it a once over, make sure nothing's bent or snapped, anything like that. But all things considered, really not too bad. Like I said, could probably definitely use a set of high facts in the near future. They're pretty worn through in the front. I think we should be in pretty good shape here. This thing will definitely be a runner, be a good little trail sled for bombing around here and, you know, ripping across the lake or whatever.
So I got these carbs all cleaned out. Eric did one. I got this other one done. We got the gasket replaced. And so now we're going to install these back on the sled. We know that with the primer, we have fuel. We'll put a little bit more gas in the tank, make sure that's good. I'm sure after sitting for a little while, it's going to take the fuel pump a second to get the gas back into the carbs and get the bowls filled. But we'll get these back on, and we'll get the spark plugs back on and get those all situated. And we should be pretty close to being ready to fire this thing up and see what she does. So let's get these installed. Well, seeing how the previous owner did this, not the one that Eric bought the sled off of, make sure to put your hose clamps in the most inconvenient spot possible so you can't get to it to tighten it up. We're going to leave it still in the inconvenient spot because I'm lazy and I don't feel like taking it off and switching it around. Okay, there's one. Okay, it's good to go. Put the caps on and spark plugs. We're good to go.
Yes, sir. That's good.
Okay, I'll throw these caps on and then I'm going to give you back to Eric and see what we can do with getting this going. Also, make sure these are facing the right way too. I've seen it before where guys have actually put them the opposite way. I don't know how, because it's really, there's a little guide on these. Okay. Make sure these lines are back, lined up. Now these lines are in pretty good shape. Otherwise, we usually always replace them, but these still have a lot of flex to them. You know what I mean? You guys will know that works on these old sleds that they like to harden up on you.
All right. Well, I went ahead and got the carbs back on here. It's all looking good. We'll go ahead and wind these spark plugs back in. Like we said earlier, these really don't look bad at all. So we're just going to run these for now. Not a big Champion fan. I usually go with the NGKs, but if they make spark, they make spark, and this thing's no race sled, so should make it run today. I always like to start them by hand. Make sure you get good threads going before you get any kind of tool on it. And just give that snug, nothing crazy again. Aluminum. You can pull the threads out of that stuff pretty quickly. We'll go ahead and fire the air box back on here. Want to make sure we get our coil pack plugged in the process. All right. So I'm gonna reach down under here and make sure this coil pack gets plugged in properly so that we actually have spark. It's a pretty important part. Make sure that connector snaps together nicely. Oh, come on. There we go. Good. Nice click out of that. Now my hand's stuck in there. Okay, good. Go ahead and get these tucked onto the airbox. Beautiful. It's your best friend if you're going to be taking apart a lot of these. Don't mess with a flathead screwdriver. It's infuriating. 5/16 nut driver. Cheap tool. Save yourself a lot of hassle. All right then. Our airbox is back on. Hose clamps are all secure. Hoses are all on. Everything's looking pretty good. We'll get our little piece of foam back in there. And we'll go ahead and get our spark plug wires put back on, because that's always important. I don't think you can mess this up. One wire is significantly longer than the other. So we're going to go ahead and put one, the closer one, and one to the further one. Okay, that's looking pretty kosher. I think we should be good. What do you think? Why are we ready to try and fire this thing up?
I think so.
All right, let's give it a go. All right, we got repositioned here. Aimed it towards the door in case for some reason it takes off. It doesn't run into one of the trucks in here. Kill switch is out. Go ahead and give this thing a couple shots of juice here. We got good fuel flowing already. Throttle seems to move freely, so it should be good there. Go ahead and give this thing a pull, see what happens. Ah, that sounded pretty promising. Couple more primes here. Hold that throttle like halfway. Yeah. Take it for a ride? Let's do it. I'd say that was a success.
Right, good.
Yeah.
So there you have it. 1995 Formula 380 fan. Runs and rides great. Next couple episodes coming up. We are actually getting parts for the Citation. They're on their way. So you're going to get an episode on that. Stay tuned for that. We also have a few episodes of the Polaris coming up. We are doing a bunch of work to that. So hopefully video uploading should be a little quicker than it's been. I was on vacation and we have snow now, so you'll see a lot more videos of these sleds coming out. I also have an Indy. I have an Indy. I'll say it. Buddy's Indy. It's pretty much the same one as mine. 440 fan. We got to get that running as well. So that'll be another future video. So stay tuned. There's going to be quite a bit coming out in the next week or two. in a few days. Hopefully. Not